I used to believe that silence was comfort, that when two people have been together long enough, they no longer need to speak to understand each other. But lately, our silence has teeth. It bites through dinner, through the hum of the television, through the sound of the city outside our window. David sits across from me, scrolling through his phone. The glow from the screen makes him look younger, almost like the man I married 10 years ago. But the light fades, and so does the memory. I stir my tea, even though I haven't added sugar, just to fill the space with motion. He glances up for a second. "Long day?" he asks. His voice sounds polite, not loving. I smile, the kind of smile that says I'm fine even when I'm not. "Same as yours, I guess." He nods, already looking back down. I watch him for a while, his hands, still strong, still beautiful, the same hands that used to trace promises on my skin. Now they just tap a screen. When he goes to shower, I walk to the balcony. The city breathes below, windows blinking like restless eyes. Somewhere out there, people are falling in love, or breaking up, or lying awake next to someone they once adored. I lean against the railing, close my eyes, and imagine our first apartment, the tiny one with the leaky faucet and the broken heater. We used to laugh at the cold, pulling the blankets over our heads, whispering secrets like children hiding from the dark. Back then, his breath on my neck was enough to make the world stop. Now, even his touch feels scheduled, like something we both forgot to cancel. I open my journal, the one I hide in the drawer beneath my scarves. Tonight's entry is short. I miss him, but I'm not sure which version I miss. The one I married, or the one I imagined he was. A knock at the balcony door startles me. David stands there, towel around his waist, hair dripping onto his shoulders. For a moment, he looks different, softer. He says, "You coming to bed?" I nod, close the journal, and follow him inside. The lights are off. Only the faint moonlight spills across the bed, outlining the space between us. We lie down, our backs almost touching, close enough to feel each other's warmth, far enough to feel the distance. Before sleep takes me, I whisper, not loud enough for him to hear, "Good night, stranger." And the silence answers back. The first time I saw her name, it was by accident. David's phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, a small vibration that sliced through the morning silence. He was in the shower. I shouldn't have looked. But curiosity isn't always disobedience. Sometimes it's survival. The name on the screen was Sophie. No last name, no emoji, just a simple message. Last night was nice. I froze, not because of the words, but because of how ordinary they looked. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark, my reflection faintly visible in the glass, a woman half there, half gone. When David came out, hair wet and skin warm from the steam, I asked nothing. He kissed my cheek, said he'd be late for work, and left a trace of soap on my skin that smelled like trust. That day I went to school and taught my students about poetry. We read a line by Sylvia Plath. "I am terrified by this dark thing that sleeps in me. and for the first time, I understood what she meant. When I came home, David wasn't back yet. The apartment smelled like nothing. I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't want and sat on the couch, scrolling through old pictures of us. Paris, 5 years ago. Rome before the arguments. Our smiles looked genuine, careless, sunlit, infinite. I tried to remember what it felt like to be desired, not tolerated. I thought about Sophie. Was she real? A co-worker? A ghost? A mirror? That night, I didn't open my journal. I just watched the rain trace lines down the window, wondering if it was possible to drown without water. When David finally came home, it was past midnight. He looked tired, or maybe guilty. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're still up." I wanted to say, "I saw her message." Instead, I said, "I couldn't sleep." He smiled faintly, turned off the light, and slipped into bed. I listened to his breathing, steady, unbothered, while mine stumbled like a broken rhythm. At some point, I whispered into the dark, "If I asked you who Sophie is, would you lie beautifully or tell me the truth that hurts?" The only answer was the rain outside, falling harder, like applause for a play that had already ended. The gallery smelled like varnish and old paper, the quiet hum of lights brushing over photographs that captured moments I could only dream of. I wasn't supposed to be here alone. David had promised to come with me, but work kept him late again. I wandered past black and white images of strangers frozen in joy, grief, and longing. My fingers itched to touch the glass, to feel their lives beneath my skin. And then I saw him, Ethan, leaning against a wall, dark hair falling across his forehead, camera slung casually over his shoulder. He was studying a photograph, as if it had a secret to tell him. When our eyes met, I felt it. That small, sudden electricity that reminds you that you are alive. He smiled, a smile that belonged only to me, though we'd never met. "You like photography?" I asked, surprising myself with how natural my voice sounded. "It depends on the story it tells." His voice was calm, measured, but it carried an intensity that made my chest tighten. We started talking about the photographs, about fleeting moments captured in silence, about lives intersecting and drifting apart. Every word from him drew me in, like a tide I couldn't fight. I realized then that David and I were not speaking the same language anymore. We had memorized each other's routines, perfected the polite gestures of marriage, but the words that truly mattered, the ones that stirred something deep, had disappeared. Ethan's presence was dangerous in its simplicity. No promises, no expectations, only honesty. I told him about my favorite photograph in the gallery, a rainy street in Paris, two people walking apart but still holding hands. "Beautiful," he said. "Lonely?" I whispered. He nodded, as if he understood the exact weight of that word, and for the first time in months, I felt someone seeing me, not the wife, not the teacher, not the woman waiting for her husband to notice her, but me. By the time the gallery emptied, we were standing close, sharing a quiet laugh over something trivial. The warmth of his shoulder brushing mine was intoxicating, yet not forbidden. Not yet. When I walked back to my apartment that night, I noticed the silence differently. The space David and I shared felt heavier, colder, but also clearer. I understood that what was happening wasn't betrayal, at least not yet. It was awakening. And I was beginning to wonder whether awakening was something I deserved, or something I feared. Maybe love isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about finding out what you're still capable of feeling. David and I tried therapy, the kind that promises breakthroughs but often leaves you raw. Sitting in that sterile office, facing each other across a table, I realized how little we had really said in the past year. "I feel invisible," I admitted, voice trembling. He looked down, then up, eyes haunted. "I didn't realize. I thought we were fine," he said. We confessed our fears, our fantasies, our doubts. Each word was a blade and a balm. We discovered that desire hadn't vanished. It had been buried under resentment, under silence. That night, lying together, we touched as if we were strangers, discovering each other for the first time. No words, just the language of memory and longing. Ethan called. I told him it was harmless, just conversation. But our words lingered, a slow burn across my mind. David noticed something had shifted. His jealousy, subtle but undeniable, reignited a flame that had gone cold. I realized that desire and betrayal were not opposites, they were two sides of the same coin. And I didn't know which I wanted more, safety or awakening. Everything came to a head one stormy night. David admitted a past indiscretion. I admitted my attraction to Ethan. We didn't shout, we didn't fight. We sat in the dark and bared everything. Pain, longing, regret, and love intertwined. By the end, we were exhausted, vulnerable, and strangely alive. Love is messy. Love is terrifying, but maybe love is also surviving the storm together. The days blurred. David and I were fragile, but alive. Our conversations were careful, deliberate, each word weighed with meaning. Ethan's messages continued, light, playful, almost innocent, but they stirred something in me that David hadn't touched in months. Curiosity, desire, excitement. I began to notice David differently. His quirks, his soft laugh, the way he brushed my hair from my face. Yet the space between us remained, like a river too wide to cross without falling in. One night, standing by the window, I realized that the choice wasn't between him and Ethan. It was between the life I had built and the life I could imagine. Ethan invited me to a photography exhibit, alone. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, loyal and obedient. Part of me wanted to see if my heart still knew how to race. I went, and for hours I was suspended in a world of images and emotion. Ethan didn't touch me, didn't overstep. He just made me feel alive again. David called that night. I didn't answer. I wanted him to notice my absence, to wonder. But he didn't. Or maybe he did, and he chose not to act. The temptation wasn't just Ethan. It was the realization that I had been asleep in my own life, waiting for someone else to wake me. David noticed. His gaze lingered the way it used to when we first met. A spark, tiny but undeniable. We started talking differently. No scripts, no politeness, no rehearsed smiles. We talked about desires we had never shared, fantasies that scared us, fears that haunted our nights. For the first time in months, we touched freely, exploring the contours of love without expectation or judgment. It was messy, it was passionate, it was real. We discovered that marriage isn't static, It's a living, breathing thing, demanding courage and honesty. The storm came, literally, that night, rain hammering against the windows, lightning splitting the sky. We sat together on the couch, arms wrapped around each other, soaked by the rain of our confessions and tears. I realized that desire is not the enemy of love. Jealousy is not the end of trust. The darkness, the temptations, the fantasies, they are all part of the landscape of intimacy. We didn't have answers. We didn't have guarantees. We had each other, fully visible, fully human, fully awake. Maybe marriage isn't about perfect moments. Maybe it's about surviving the storms together, awake and willing to feel everything. Ethan and I had coffee that afternoon, sunlight pouring over the table like a spotlight on my restless heart. I told him about the gallery, about feeling alive again. He listened. No judgment, no expectation, just presence. But even in his quiet understanding, I realized that David's absence was a shadow in my chest. I was drawn to both worlds, the comfort and history of my marriage and the awakening that Ethan offered. I couldn't have both, and yet I couldn't let either go. I returned home to David that evening, rain still dripping from the windows, and I told him everything. The thoughts, the attraction, the fears, the yearning. He didn't lash out. He didn't leave. He just listened. "You are allowed to feel," he said. "Even if it scares me, I want you to be honest." For the first time, honesty felt like freedom rather than danger. We held each other, trembling, realizing that our love had survived, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Days passed, and the intimacy we shared was different now. Less about obligation, more about exploration. We talked late into the night, tracing the edges of desire, revisiting memories, laughing at the small things we'd forgotten. It wasn't perfect. It was raw, unpredictable, human. Ethan's presence faded gently, a reminder of what we had almost lost and what we had almost found. I realized that the awakening wasn't about him. It was about me, about rediscovering myself within the marriage I had thought was dead. We planned a weekend trip to the coast, a small escape from routine and expectation. Walking along the beach, hand in hand, I noticed the way David's fingers fit perfectly with mine. Not out of habit, but choice. We talked, we laughed, we argued, we kissed, not the practiced kisses of years ago, but the ones that carried new meaning, full of awareness and longing. The spark hadn't returned, it had transformed. From comfort to fire, from habit to connection. Months later, we sat together watching the sunset spill over the city. I held my journal in my lap, the pages full of confessions, fears, and realizations. I realized that marriage, love, and desire are never simple. They are a series of awakenings, challenges, and choices. David turned to me and smiled softly. "I love you," he said. And I believed him, fully. Not because love is easy, but because it is brave. I knew the temptation, the fantasies, the shadows, they would always be there, but so would we. And that was enough. Love is not perfect. Love is awake.